And now we're doing some color matching. So to create this beautiful red, I've got magenta and pure red. The magenta cools down that red just a little bit, and then adding black to make a darker shade of the red, more of a burgundy. Now I'm adding water, a little bit of water as we go, so that we can get it to that nice creamy consistency. And I'm also adding a little bit more red here so that I have a slightly lighter shade of that burgundy to work with. So again, this is pure red, a little bit of magenta, and then a little bit of black. And we're going to start painting our leaf, making sure again that we've got the right consistency, and we're starting from one edge of the drawing and working our way across. And to get those ridges along the edge of the leaf, that serrated edge, I'm using the brush. So I'm not going in and filling in every little point. I'm allowing the brush to help me create that feathered texture. And that's what's so great about brushes, right? Is very often they lend themselves to making these types of textures. So it's much easier to do it this way. It has more energy. You get more of a gestural look. You're going to hear me say gestural a lot throughout this demo, because really that's what it's all about, right? We're using Mary Blair as our inspiration, and she was all into the gesture and quickly painting with energy. So doing the stem there, go ahead and use a smaller brush for your stems. Yeah, I kind of wish I had, but here we go, making an even darker burgundy now so that we can start to bring in these darker areas of our leaf. So we've got some areas there where the leaf has lost more of its color, but we also have some shading because the leaf isn't perfectly flat. So going in with this darker burgundy, I'm quickly adding in these dark points. So I've slowed down the video here, so this is real time so that you can see how quickly I'm doing this. I'm looking at the leaf for reference, but I'm not being really precious about it. I'm just sort of blocking in those darker colors. Now while this coat of darker burgundy is still slightly wet, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and take some of this lighter burgundy after I clean off my brush. And I'm going to take this lighter burgundy and bring it back in and start to blend the two. So this is a wet on wet blending technique. With gouache, it's pretty difficult because it does dry quickly. So if it doesn't work for you the first time, don't worry about it. Just go ahead and go over it. You can keep going over it and over it with new coats of paint. Or, you can have multiple leaves drawn so that you can keep experimenting. But here you can see that I am blending that darker. I'm bringing in a little bit more of that darker burgundy and then a little bit of the light color here and blending the two. So this is one way to create a textured look, is by doing this wet on wet blend. And now that I've got it, pretty blended out, I'm going to refer back to my leaf so that I can see where those even darker areas are and see where it is lighter and just sort of fiddle with it a bit more until I've got it where I want it. This is where I want you. Okay, so that looks a bit better. We're just going to put a little bit more of the dark on the stem here. A little bit on this, on the veins. And there we have it. Okay, moving on to this leaf. Now to get this shade of yellow, or this hue of yellow, we're going to use, green. We're going to use yellow and black. So mixing black in with yellow makes a really beautiful green. It's more of a diminished yellow green as opposed to a true green, which, some leaves are true green, or when we think of grass green, but in this case, it's more of a yellow green, and it's a darker shade. So using a bit of black, a little bit of yellow, and some water there to mix them together. And then I'm going to bring in just a tiny little kiss of cyan, and that will cool it down a bit. Did you hear that? My dog just sneezed. I think my dog's ready to go for a walk, so he'll have to be patient. And now we're painting from the bottom of the leaf up to the pointy part. And I like to paint in this direction because my paintbrush tends to get sort of pointy from the pressure. And so it's a good direction to move in. And I've kind of overdone it with that leaf. I was trying to make it the perfect shape, but this one is a little more how you want to do it. Less strokes, so less finicky, and then you can perfect it with the second or third coat. So there we go. So now that it's drying, we're ready for a second coat, and you'll see a bit of extra paint sort of gets smooshed on my leaf there, so I just smooth it out. All right, on we go to the Chinese lantern. So we need to make a nice red orange. So we've got our yellow there, adding a little bit of water to the yellow, getting it to that consistency, patting down and spinning, and then adding a little of that red that I already have on my palette. So there's a true orange, but we want to make it a red orange. So thinking of the color wheel, I'm going to add more of my red. And that's about right. So the same technique as before, starting on one edge of the drawing. So getting my page here to the right angle, and we're going to start on one edge and then paint across. So you want to try to avoid painting the outline of an object and then filling it in, because the outline tends to dry darker. And this way things look a little more even. You can see it's slightly streaky, but that's okay because we will do a second coat of that orange. But first we're going to make a slightly darker orange with a bit of black and a little bit of green to diminish that saturation, to desaturate it. Because before I do a second coat, I'm going to keep working on the first coat, but there's parts that are a little bit darker. Like this indentation here on the top of the lantern, we want to make that slightly darker because less light reaches it. And I'm also going to use this darker shade to paint the stem. Did I mention you should use a smaller brush than I am? I'm being so impatient here. I end up kind of ruining my stem, but adding a little bit of green there to the end. Cute. Okay, so we're now going to fix the stem because, as you can see, I'm ruining it. So I'm going to blend up a bit more of this darker orange, add a little tiny bit more of the black and green to it just to make it deeper there, a little bit of the red as well, and then filling in that indentation, and now I'm starting to do the segments as well. So if we refer back to our object, you can see here that there are darker parts where there's less light, right? So we've got these sort of shaded parts of the lantern. So I'm going to come in with a smaller brush, and I am quickly bringing in these darker areas. And now we're ready for the highlights. So the wonderful thing about gouache is you can paint lighter colors over top of darker colors. So I'm creating this really light creamy white, which is white mixed with a tiny bit of that orange. And now we're just going to do the highlights. So where the light is hitting the parts of the Chinese lantern that really poke out of those segments there. And we do them the same way we did the darker areas, gestural, imperfect, and with energy and with confidence, these bold lines. And there you have it. So I'm going to go ahead and use this lighter creamy color to paint the veins on this leaf. Now you can see they're darker in reality, but that's okay. We're not going for absolute realism here. These these are not photoreal paintings, people. So again, with a bit of speed and confidence, we get these fun lines here. I am looking at the leaf to see where those spines are, but I'm not painting every single one. And I'm doing this with sort of a looser grip and letting it be what it will be. There we go. All right, now on to the next type of texture. And this is one of the things I love doing with gouache. I love so many aspects of gouache, but we're going to make the sort of yellowy flecked part, or speckled, freckled, what would you call that? But the lighter texture there on the leaves. So we're going to make a nice creamy yellowy green, a light tint because we're adding white to it. And I'm going to use my fan brush, and it's dry. I haven't put it into water, dipping it into the paint and then sort of blotting off a little bit of it on my palette, and then coming into the leaf there and just dab, 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 dab. Dab, 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 dab. And I recommend making sound effects because why not? All right. So there's no wrong way to do this, really. I think the secret here, or the tip, there's no secret. The tip is to experiment, to play around, and to start lighter and then to add more, right? So if you just do a little bit of this sort of dab, 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 and then you think, oh, it's, I'm not really seeing enough. I want it to be a little bit more bold, then go ahead and add more. And now we're going to do the stem. And here's the trick. With this, you want to water down your paint a little bit more. And I added black to that cyan, so it's not pure black. There's a little bit of this sort of blue cyan tint to it. And yeah, adding a little bit more water allows it to flow easier as you're doing these longer lines. And so this leaf is a lot of fun. We're going to do 3 layers here. So starting with the background color, the main sort of color of the leaf behind that green is yellow. So we're bringing in this lovely creamy yellow with just a little hint of green in it. So it is considered a green yellow, but very much on the yellow side of things. And painting in one direction towards the point of the leaf. And now we're going to bring in this sort of lighter green back there. But you could see it's a little rough, right? So we're using a rough brush. This is a dry brush. This is for oil painting, and I just cut the end of it off so it's even more rough. And I've dipped into my paint, taken a little bit more green there, and without any water on the brush, I dry brush in that lighter greeny color. Lovely. Nice and rough. And now we're going to bring in this darker green on top. So the darker green on top is slightly cooler than the color that we've got. It's cool and it's dark. So we're going to use some of that ultramarine, which is a warmer blue. But when we mix it with that black that I have there that has a bit of cyan in it, plus we've got a bit of that green that I already mixed, we're going to get that nice deep green. Ooh, there's some traffic happening outside. Lots of ambient noises today. So yeah, bringing this in with my brush and a little bit of water on that as well, coming back to that more creamy consistency, but I am allowing the edges to be rough so that it is similar to the leaf, and then bringing in an even darker shade there for the center, and on we go to our hydrangea. But we're starting with the dark color, and then while it's still wet, adding a lighter shade or a lighter tint and blending that up towards the point of the petal. And we'll go ahead and add a little bit more white. And so this also takes practice and a lot of experimentation just to get the drying times correct so that you can blend. But it's also nice to allow the texture of the brush to show, and to also take out little hairs when you find them. There we go. And yeah, again, experimenting is highly recommended when it comes to blending and creating textures this way. All right, we're going to do the same thing with the other petals here. I'm just adding a little bit more white there to the tip so that that gradient is a little more obvious. Yeah, that looks a bit better. Now, when looking back at the petals of the actual flower, there's this beautiful bright blue sort of flecked throughout the petal. So what I'm doing is I'm grabbing some ultramarine with some white on a dry brush. So I've got another dry brush here, and I'm just going to stroke in the center here just very quickly with the dry brush. Look at that. I love that gorgeous, bright, hot blue. It's neat that blue can be warm in temperature. And so you go ahead and practice your foliage, your textures. And I did one here that's more of an experiment. This one is a little more Mary Blair-esque. But yeah, have a good time, and I'll see you at the next lesson.